Well, it seems like 3 is a magic number because it looks to me like there have been 3 high-level martial arts teachers who've been a big influence on my martial arts life, usually from a distance and a few times up close. So that would be Edwin Takamori, Lawrence Ford, and George Dillman. Reading the book Prometheus really helped me get how the Dillman piece actually fit into my martial arts my martial arts life. Because briefly, the Edwin Takamori piece, that was judo. So my mother had taken us to judo, and that's how that seed got planted from him. The whole Taekwondo piece, Lawrence Ford, some people call him Maurice. He's a relative of mine, and he used to work with my mother, so he eventually convinced her to get me to take Taekwondo. Not from him at the time, but she signed me up for a Taekwondo class that was near us because she believed it was good for grades, and I think she used to talk to him about it sometimes. So that's where that piece came from. But the George Dillman piece, I used to hear my mother talk about, and I did not know it was all the same person. I didn't know all this was Dillman. It was different times when she said, when she was talking about, you want to take karate or something like that. Oh, well, I wish I could take you down to Stadium Armory. They used to have classes there. I was born in 70, so when Dillman had a school in D.C., which he mentions in the book Prometheus, the George Dillman story. When he had his school in D.C., I was a baby, and I lived in Southern Maryland. So there would have been no way for me to conveniently take classes there way back then. So she had said, I remember her saying stuff about that sometimes. I didn't know what she was talking about, because by the time I got to be conscious and cognizant, there were no karate classes down at Stadium Armory. So I was like, this woman is crazy, what's she talking about? She also used to watch Ripley's Believe It or Not. And sometimes she talked about some guy in Pennsylvania. And it sounds to me like she probably looked at some of the black belt magazines at the time and saw write-ups on Dillman. And see, Dillman used to come to tournaments, and I think he hosted a couple of tournaments in the D.C. area. Back then, as well as now, but definitely back then, the Washington, D.C., the Maryland, Virginia area was a big martial arts hub on the East Coast. We're talking 60s, 70s, and 80s. So George Dillman was well known around here. And when I had finally rediscovered him as an adult, and I said, you heard about this pressure point guy? And this was back when I really didn't believe what he was doing. I didn't believe it. I said, yes, this guy, I've seen some stuff, say he could knock people out, whatever. Oh yeah, I know Dillman. Yeah, I'm surprised at how many people know this guy. I never really heard of him. So then there was the stories I heard some stories about, people making jokes about, oh, you want to take karate, what are you going to do? You're going to fight a bear or something? I was like, what are you talking about? There's no way I could fight a bear. But George Dillman was the man who wrestled with the bear. So that was him. And I remember one time my mother saying something about the guy who could break the ice. If you could train with the guy who could really break the ice, I wish I could take you to train with him, but he's too far. The guy who could break the ice was George Dillman. She used to watch Ripley's Believe It or Not. So the first time she saw him break the ice, I think she mentioned that to me, and I was like, who cares about breaking the ice? I can go on the refrigerator and break some ice with a cup or a hammer. Who cares, right? I didn't think about the big, huge blocks of ice. Then there was one time I saw this white guy break. It was a Ripley's Believe It or Not rerun. I saw this white guy break these big blocks of ice. And it's like, believe it or not. I chose not. I said, there's got to be a trick to this. I didn't believe this guy could break this ice like that. I'm thinking he must have cut it and put it back together or something. And of course, the people I talked to at the time who I thought were all-knowing, not the adults, of course. I talked to teenagers. Because, of course, who do young children look up to? Teenagers. Because teenagers are very good at convincing other children that they know what they're talking about. So I assume the teenagers knew what they were talking about, and they didn't. But I thought they did. And they were like, oh, man, yeah, that's a trick, man. Yeah, he just cuts and puts it back together, man. Come on, that ain't real, man. That ain't real. That type of thing. And so, there again. So you got this guy, this mysterious figure, whose ideas and limits have been trickled down to me just through his influence and him being an active part of and giving back to the martial arts. So when I finally get around to reading his book, I start reading Prometheus, not the other books that I did a review on. The Pressure Point books. Those are amazing. And like I said in my review, any George Dillman book, just get it and buy it. So when I start reading his story, I'm like, oh, okay. Now I see this. Now I see that. Now I see some of the stuff my mother was talking about. And okay, this is what the tournament scene was like going on in the DC area. Now I would like to put a challenge out there. That is, if anybody can write a biography of Simba Dojang, I would like to see that. What was going on with Simba back in the day. Just for my own curiosity. Who knows, maybe one day I could do it. But, if you beat me to it, I won't be mad at you. If you've written one and then I get around to writing one later on, there'll just be 2 Simba Dojang biographies. If you don't know who Simba Dojang is, who they are, look them up. But they are a big piece of local martial arts history for the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, as is Ki Wang Kim, as is, I don't know his first name, so as is Grandmaster Myung, and of course as is Jun Ri, and of course as is, believe it or not, Bruce Lee. So the whole, maybe I should just call it there's been a Dillman effect on my life. And I didn't even know it. But the main part of the Dillman effect is that I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. I did not believe that he could do what he can do. Matter of fact, the first time I've only been knocked out by Dillman once, I think. Yeah, once. Flat prone. I did not believe that George Dillman could knock me out until after I went to my friend Dave had been telling me, you gotta go to these pressure point things, man. Because I was starting to think, well, I really want to know what these forms mean. And I had my own applications. And I still think those applications would have worked. But they were based on the whole structural weak points paradigm. Very few of them actually would be considered Q-show. But they were basically just based on blunt force trauma, vital weak points, and some grappling applications. And yeah, they would work. They would work using a weaker person, doing them on a stronger person. But a Kyusho application just amps your stuff up to the next level. So it's not like what I was starting to figure out and look at on my own was useless. But he said, no, if you really want to, because I sent him some of his stuff, he said, this is good. But I'm telling you, if you really want to take it to the next level, you've got to come to some of these pressure point seminars I've gone to. So, okay, I trust Dave. I trust Dave Hacker. Fine, he's a good friend, good mentor. So, you know, it's like, okay, Dave says I'm going to go. I'm going to go. So I went to this Pressure Point seminar. This was one of the ones that Grandmaster Sterling Johnson had Dumfries. He was another person I met back in the day. See, and he's a student of George Dillman. I didn't know that. I had met him back in the day. When I was little, he was probably... No, I was 17, so he was probably like in his late 20s. But anyway. So I go to the Pressure Point seminar. And I hear about the whole... I'm just riveted by the history. About how, you know, they didn't really pass on the true secrets to Americans because of the war. And also because of when they introduced karate into the school system, they didn't want children. I got interrupted, so I'm going to have to backtrack a little bit. Sorry for being redundant. Okay, so I see how they didn't teach the real karate secrets to Americans because of the war, and to children when they introduced it to the school system because they didn't want kids hurting each other that much. So I'm riveted about all that. And of course, since I've never been there before, I was sucker number one, boy. I'm standing there, right? And I'm like, I can't hear, because sometimes I have hearing problems. So I couldn't hear. So I'm like, let me get closer. And it was so easy for me, like, to get closer to George, because everybody else is moving out the way. If he looked, every time he would look in one direction, they all move. So I'm like, I move up there. I'm like, I want to see and hear what he's really talking about. And so, and then he keeps talking, and then he just walked over another direction, and they all moved out of the way because they didn't want to get knocked out. So I'm like, these guys are scared. I'm like, oh, he's going to do a technique on somebody. I guess they're scared. Whatever. So I moved over there. And then I remember he did, it wasn't really a full knockout on someone. So he got one guy, he did like a, I guess you'd call it like a half knockout. The guy was staggering, well, it was a standing knockout. So it wasn't knocking a person to prone position. And I was like, oh, that's not bad. You know, what are these people so afraid of? Give me a break. And so they keep running, and I keep moving up to the front because I'm stupid, right? Plus, I was in a bad mood that day. So I guess the sensors for don't be an idiot hadn't gone off. So then I'm finally standing, and then he comes over to me, right? He comes over towards me, and there are two guys in front of me. They move. So I'm standing there, right? And he's like, well, stick out your hand and try to blah, blah, right? I'm like, okay, whatever this is. So I stick out my hand, and then he does one thing to the arm. I was like, man, my arm is numb. It's weird. It's like my arm is numb. But I can tell, even though it's got an effect that will work in a fight, I can feel that this isn't permanent damage, but this would be good to do to someone. So I'm like, dang, this is pretty good, but I still don't believe it's really all that Dave said it was. And then he hits another point. And I'm like, dang, that's pretty good. I could still probably function, but I don't know, I'm not really feeling this whole pressure point thing, right? And then he hit the other one, back. And I reacted, and I just automatically went to a guard. But then, I couldn't move. It was just like, and this is another reason why I like the Street Fighter 2 5, the animated series. Because there is in one of the, I can't remember which episode it was, there's an episode when Ken and Ryu meet Dawson. He does pressure point knockouts on a guy, and the guy can't move. And somebody has a gun on him, and he takes the gun out of the guy's hand because the guy can't move. So Dillman did that to me, and I'm not going to share exactly what it was. I'm not. You can get mad as you want. If you want to know exactly what it was, that was something that can keep somebody from moving, you can pay to find out, because I'm not going to tell you. And it was like right out of the freaking cartoon. I was like, oh my God, this stuff is real. And then I tried to fight it. And some of you aren't going to believe me. Sometimes I can see my energy, especially back then, because I was doing more meditation. Sometimes I can see my energy, And sometimes I can manipulate it. I have to say sometimes because I can't do it all the time and I don't have it down yet. And I haven't really been concentrating on it. So it gets me out of emergencies. So that's good enough for me for now. And so I'm like, I see the Chi River and I see the Chi River and I see he reversed the flow of my Chi River. And then I'm trying to push it back. And I can't push it back. Because when I try to push it back, it makes the effect worse. Keep in mind, and all this sounds like science fiction. I know it does unless you've ever experienced it. Keep in mind that there was no pain involved in this. There was no real fear involved in other than the fear or blow to my paradigm, my perception, my perception of how things are supposed to go. There was no like bodily harm done to me. So that's why it would be an excellent thing to learn how to do so that you can stop somebody that's, being violent without really doing true damage to them. And so he goes, you got to stop fighting it, man, because you're just making it worse. You're going to have to go down. So I just let myself go down. And I didn't even fall. But when I went to the ground, that was it. Then the full effect took over and everything. Then they had to sit me up and do the revival, or else I probably would have been laying on the ground for about, from what I felt like, I probably would have been laying on the ground for about 20 minutes. And then I found out later, yeah, that's about how long it would take for it to wear off. So if you use something like these good Q-show pressure points, if you learn how to use them to stun people so that they can't move, if they're attacking you, you could daze them. They're stuck there, and you can just leave. And it's going to, just like they say, it will wear off. It's going to wear off. And the person's going to be okay. Because afterwards, I was fine. I actually felt a lot more relaxed. It was like, I had some stress and tension that day, too, before I got there. And it got rid of it. I actually felt a lot better, believe it or not. But the thing that really irritated me, though, was after I got interrupted again. The thing that really irritated me is after I get up off the ground, I heard some dude go, oh, he's faking. He's such a faker. He's such a faker. No, I wasn't faking, man. It was for real. So I find out the stuff that this Dillman guy does is for real. But I still didn't put it all together that this is the same guy that wrestled the bear, who was the guy that my mother used to talk about, who was the guy that several other people I've heard talking about. This is the same breaking the ice guy. And this is a guy who was, I hear little things mentioned about him passing, like, people will be like, well, blah, blah, blah. But that white man, yeah, he's good. That good. If you could ever admit that guy. What guy? What are you talking about? Yeah, he good. He good. Oh, okay. Well, now I know that guy was George Dillman. So I liken it to the old adage of don't seek the master, seek what the master sought. Because the thing is, I found Edwin Takamori, I found Maurice Ford, and I found George Dillman when I became an adult. Not by looking for them directly, but by looking for what they at one point had been looking for. So it's really true that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Because at different points, those teachers appeared. Even if not directly through them, through people that they taught. And we all pretty much found each other at one point. So all that to say is that's all of that is my reaction to reading Prometheus by George Dillman. It's a long review, I know. But aside from how my own personal story with it, man, you should just get the book, because he's got some funny stories in it. He's got really good theory in there. Really good analysis of why. If you want to know why you do stuff in your karate and in your taekwondo, that book will tell you. So I hope that you get a copy of the book. I also hope that some of the other people who've had huge impact on traditional martial arts in the United States, particularly people who've had a big impact in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, in D.C., Maryland, Virginia, tri-state area, I hope they write down and share their stories so that a lot of this great information and the great contributions that have been done by these great people don't get lost to history. And if you stay with me this long, I want to say thanks, and I just want to say peace to you, and I hope you find what you're looking for, because it's a really good feeling when you're someone who's been looking for stuff for a long time and you finally find it, and you can put all the pieces to your individual puzzle together. Peace.